Deepwoken has gone through two in-game recessions, the first one occurring during mid to late 2022 before the Layer 2 drop, and the second one being the current state of the game that we're in today. In today's video, I'll be talking about these two time periods to compare the reasons why Deepwoken has sudden and significant drops in players. Make sure to subscribe, and also I'll be live on Twitch right after this video comes out, so come into the stream and drop in after watching. Now let's get straight into it. Back in 2022, before the biggest update ever seen, that being verse 2, the game went through its first recession in players, with numbers consistently low as 4,000 to 5,000 at peak hours, which was absolutely insane. Today the game is around 5,000 to 10,000 players on average, which is lower than it was even weeks or months ago, but for early morning hours or work hours, I've seen the game as low as 2,000 players, which is on the same tier as Rogue Lineage on its average good days, which may sound like a lot, but in comparison to its averages and peaks, overall this is terribly bad, especially when just a few months ago the game was averaging 20,000 players at any given time. The first recession happened for a few reasons and in relation to a few updates or lack thereof. Let me show you guys some examples of updates that came out during this time in mid 2022. First of all, the main selling point of this content update, which is going to be the first one I'm showing you, is the ability to choose the ability to spawn in with dual attunement. Directly before this was Hallowtide, which saw a small jump in players and was actually quite fun, but nothing major. Before that, we had an update with no content or systemic changes at all. Like, to be fair, out of all the ones I've mentioned other than Hallowtide here, we haven't had any real content yet, but they didn't even have a content or systems patch log. It just went straight into balancing adjustments for that week. And then before that, they made a new UI for looting. New UI. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? If you ever see a UI change in Deepwoken's patch notes, you know the game is about to enter a bad recession. There were pretty much no actual content updates from the times of April 2022 all the way up until like November, and that's only because Hallowtide came out. When we first had news about Layer 2 potentially coming out in the summer of 2022, we thought that it was going to come out then, but you know, then we got no updates up until November, and then December, which was finally verse 2, only about 7 months late. That's nearly a year with no major content updates. And excluding major content update, the game went on for like 3 months with no real content updates, with the biggest thing we got being a UI change and the ability to spawn in with more than one attunement. And this is important for a few reasons. First of all, it really shows the difference in priority that the devs have now versus then in terms of like padding their weekly updates, right? Like back then, they didn't even try disguising the lack of content with like padding in the content and systems page. A lot of these updates just straight up had no content, and they let people see that. But then like today, you go into the update logs, and they don't go straight into balancing. Nowadays, they'll put new sword VFX in the contents and systems tab, which, can we just talk about how it's content and systems and you're putting VFX in there? That is not content and that is not a system. That is a graphical change. Now, this isn't important, but when we compare it today, we can see some very similar patterns and a few new ones. First of all, there hasn't been an actual good content update in like 5 months. The last actual content update was the World Events update on December 24th of 2024, in place of Conquest. Now, when I say this may seem like a good, rather large update, but there were a few problems with it. First of all, they didn't market the World Events update at all. They dropped it on a random weekly update with no pre-announcement or anything major, which is why the player count didn't get any massive jumps despite it being a rather large update. But also, this update is half-baked. All the things that were dropped with the World Events update were supposed to drop with Conquest, which still hasn't come out yet. So basically, they released half an update without the main appeal and marketing point that they had for that given update. So it really didn't help the game all that much, and it wasn't even supposed to come out when it did. It really seems like the only reason why the World Events update even came out was so that way they could give us like some content and then excuse themselves from being super late and delaying Conquest further. As for recent updates, it's actually quite similar. We got a UI rehaul that honestly complicate things a bit too much. A few new stats, which are meant to provide more possible variety in builds, being the body, mind, and whatever the third one stat are, which I think are actually a good addition. But they're really not that useful, because they would be a good addition if there was talent variety in this game, but there really isn't. I think that it has a lot of potential because now people can start going in different orders for different stats for different weapons. So honestly, I'd be up for them completely revamping the weapon stat requirement and armor stat requirement system to being around the body and mind stats, so you have to get those to certain levels, but you don't need X specific stat and number. So if they revamp stuff, that would actually be pretty cool and could potentially lead to some variety, but we'd need to see some more new new potential side grade or meta talents to enter the game, because right now the game really revolves around like the same 5 different talents in PvP and PvE, which is pretty lame, right? And then the next most recent update that we got was a new face creation system, which is both the best and the worst thing they've ever added, because now I see High Duke and Ahegao furries, but I also see Billions Must Die. Regardless, what all of these updates have in common is that they're not content. The devs have been doing weekly updates for years at this point, and eventually they run out of ideas, which is a big problem, especially because they spend time and resources on weeklies, taking time out from doing the major updates that people actually want. Sure, people are gonna hop on and check out the face creation, but that's not bringing players back. And along with a whole lot of delayed major updates, which has contributed to both times the game started to have significant fall-offs in player count, it's just like, why do they keep doing this? They keep announcing stuff, they keep delaying things, right? The first time was with Layer 2, which people expected to be out during summer, and then the second time being now because Conquest has already been delayed like 3 times, and then they released the content that was supposed to come with Conquest, and we can't even get the major update we actually wanted. Which, by the way, did anyone actually want Conquest? Does anyone watching this video care about Conquest? Do you care about Conquest? I don't. The only reason I want Conquest is so that way they can work on stuff better than Conquest. I don't care about a League of Legends game mode in Deepwoken. Fuck League of Legends. Fuck Conquest, right? Conquest was delayed 3 times over the last 3 years so far, and that's absolutely insane. And there's another thing that really stands to this, but if anyone knows what I'm talking about, there's this old Discord message of Archmage saying, if we had a year to work on something, we'd still do it last minute. And I think this really encapsulates this, because they've had so much time to work on Conquest, and we've seen so many progress updates in such little time. They're saying, oh, we're working really fast, but 3 years later we still don't have the update. And they still haven't dropped it, and I think the only way we're gonna see it is when the game hits record lows for player counts, like it did when Verse 2 dropped, and then we're finally gonna get something major. Now, we also had a rather surprising and recent developer interview, which was bad, right? They said they'd be coming back to work on things like Layer 3 and future major updates like the Void Tower. But why are they announcing this? There's no reason for the developers to be talking about this, and it's not even a good idea to build hype around these. Assuming the next update has to be Conquest because it's been their main focus for 3 years now, then talking about 2 or 3 major updates down the line is literally just going to bring major disappointment when the community sees that, you know, the update that's gatekeeping these updates is 3 years off track. So how long do you expect it to take for Layer 3 or Void Tower or any other major updates to come out? If we go by the same schedule, Layer 3 will be out by 2036. I'm going to be 35 years old when that update drops. I'm not going to be playing this fucking game. I'm going to be retired. My ass might have even stopped making videos at that point. I do this for fun. This ain't a job for me. I'm not sticking around till 2050 for Conquest. And then looking back, we actually got basically the exact same promises with the World Events Conquest vote that they did. If you remember, the devs voted for what we wanted first, and World Events won, but the devs went ahead and focused on Conquest anyway because it was what they wanted, because they're all filthy League players. Lame, but whatever. In the end, we ended up getting World Events first, but I think this really shows how poorly marketed the World Events update was. When a majority of your community votes on it, hundreds of thousands of people voted on World Events, and then they dropped it, the game didn't see a significant jump in players. Why? Because they just didn't market it. Your player count doesn't budge in the slightest when there's an update that so many people wanted. It's clearly an issue with the developers and the development team and not the player base. Because I haven't even played this update. I didn't care about it. If they hyped this up, I would have played it. I still haven't fought any of the 3 new bosses because they literally just don't interest me. The devs did a great job hyping up Layer 2 release, and that was amazing. I was on it day 1. They could have done the same with World Events, but they didn't, so I don't even want to play it. I just don't want to. Not in the slightest. No part of me has ever seen any of the World Events or the new bosses and been like, I'll try that out. Because they don't even market it properly. It's lame. Overall, the developers really need to stop doing these boring weekly updates and just allocate their time and resources to something major for a while, because their player base is sick of the game being so content starved, right? They drop a weekly with new UIs, a change that wasn't needed, and call it content like anyone really cares. And it wasn't even a quality of life update because honestly, the old UI was simpler to see information on. The new one is kind of weird. As a whole, they just gotta lock in and make something big, or finish a Ceramide Hollow and give it its own unique boss and drops like it was supposed to have. There's so much stuff that the game was supposed to have that they should be working on, and instead they're giving us these lame weeklies trying to keep their player base when the player base doesn't care about these weeklies. We want to see the big updates. Anyway, make sure to subscribe, come watch my stream. Shoutouts to YouTube members Green, Pickle, Brick, Goobka, Drizzy Drake Fan, Bacon, and Highcard. I love you all. Hope you all have an amazing day. Leave a comment down below if you disagree, agree, or want to add something to what I'm saying, and goodbye.